This is the rest of my career written down here.
Do you want another one?
Yeah, definitely. I'm
Mature
loving it.
cheddar.
Think back to the summer of 1997. The Verve's Bittersweet Symphony was everywhere.
Well, it's a bittersweet.
Blasting from car radios in Britain, looping on MTV in the States, and quickly sitting at number 2 on the UK singles chart and number 12 on the US Billboard Hot 100. Every spin of that sweeping string riff added to a royalty pile later pegged at almost $5 million. The track even grabbed Grammy and Brit Award nominations and turned up in ads, movies, and sports montages. But those dollars never reached the man who wrote the words, Richard Ashcroft. The strings were borrowed from an orchestral cover of the Rolling Stones' The Last Time, and the Stones' publisher, ABK Co., argued the sample crossed the line. After a quick legal tussle, ABK Co. plus Mick Jagger and Keith Richards took 100% of the publishing, leaving the Verve with nothing but the applause. This film unpacks how one small sample turned a career-making hit into perhaps the biggest royalty grab in pop, and how 22 years later, the Stones finally handed the song back. Britpop had Britain buzzing in the mid-1990s. Oasis and Blur grabbed headlines with their North versus South chart duel. Suede and Pulp filled out magazine covers. And suddenly, homegrown guitar bands were scoring #1 singles while primetime TV treated them like World Cup heroes. The big years, 1995 and 1996, made it feel as if anything carrying a Union Jack-shaped riff could conquer the globe. Amid that roar stood 4 friends from Wigan who called themselves The Verve. Richard Ashcroft vocals, Nick McCabe guitar, Simon Jones bass, and Peter Salisbury drums had spent half a decade on the indie circuit, drifting from psychedelic jams on A Storm in Heaven, 1993, to bruised rock on A Northern Soul, 1995. Critics loved them, radio not so much. By early 1996, the group had even split for a few tense months, only to reunite, now with schoolmate Simon Tong on keys and second guitar, to take one last swing. That swing happened at London's Olympic Studios. Ashcroft wanted a street corner symphony, something that felt massive yet hypnotic, like a hip-hop loop stretched over a rock song. I would never have dreamed of looping a tiny fragment into a whole track without those rap records I loved, he later said. So engineer Chris Potter and producer Youth built the song around a 4-second sample Ashcroft had lifted from an obscure 1965 instrumental, the Andrew Oldham Orchestra's string-laden cover of the Rolling Stones' The Last Time. Because the snippet came from a non-Stones recording, the band thought a quick clearance would do. Their label struck what they believed was a straight 50-50 publishing split with ABK-CO, the company run by former Stones manager Alan Klein. No one in the room guessed that Klein would later argue the Verve had used too much of the sample, opening the door to a fight that would swallow every penny the song earned. For the moment, though, the gamble looked genius. When Bittersweet Symphony hit stores on 16th of June 1997, it shot to #2 in the UK, and, helped by a video of Ashcroft power walking through London, soon broke the US top 20, setting up the band for their biggest year yet. The paperwork headache began even before Bittersweet Symphony hit shop shelves. Virgin Records had cleared the rights to the recording of the Andrew Oldham Orchestra's 1965 string version of The Last Time, and, so the band believed, struck a simple split-it-down-the-middle publishing deal with Alan Klein's company ABK-CO, which owned the songwriting rights. But when the single was poised for release, Klein insisted the Verve had looped far more than the tiny snippet we agreed on, and he refused final clearance. Virgin could either pull the track or renegotiate. Under pressure, the label ceded 100% of the publishing to ABK-CO, and Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were added as co-writers, even though neither man had set foot in the studio. The settlement was brutal. Richard Ashcroft received a one-off check for just $1,000. Every future royalty check, mechanical or performance, was diverted to ABKCO and the Stones camp. John Kennedy, the Verve's co-manager, later called it one of the toughest deals in music history, while bassist Simon Jones remembered being told point blank, hand over everything or withdraw the record from sale. As the song exploded worldwide in 1997 and 98, the financial gulf grew wider. Billboard later estimated that the publishing pot for Bittersweet Symphony ballooned to almost $5 million, none of which reached Ashcroft's bank account. The wound was salted in March 1998 when Nike licensed the track for a high-profile U.S. television campaign. Because Virgin still controlled the sync, advertising rights, the label pocketed a reported six-figure fee. Industry insiders quote figures between $500,000 and $700,000, while the Verve, who had always objected to their music appearing in commercials, watched from the sidelines. Awards only amplified the sting. The single earned Grammy and Brit nominations and soundtracked everything from Nike ads to movie trailers, yet every time it spun on radio or appeared on TV, the earnings flowed to Jagger, Richards, and ABKCO. Rolling Stone magazine called the outcome patently absurd, a sentiment echoed by fans who dubbed the saga the greatest hit heist of all time. By the end of the 1990s, Bittersweet Symphony had become both a Britpop anthem and a textbook warning about sample clearance, a 4-second loop that cost its creators millions and handed rock's elder statesmen an unexpected windfall. The stage was set for a 2-decade struggle to claw those rights back. For a song its authors couldn't cash in on, Bittersweet Symphony refused to fade. By 2019, Billboard calculated the track had generated almost $5 million in publishing royalties, every cent of it routed to ABKCO and the Stones camp. Add in the performance money from hundreds of millions of radio spins, and you start running out of zeros. The tune also became a licensing magnet. Nike's 1998 US I Can campaign paid a reported $700,000 for the master. The Verve saw only their contractually fixed a $175 K-share and donated it to charity, while ABKCO pocketed the rest. Hollywood soon followed. The song's climactic blast over the funeral scene in Cruel Intentions, 1999, turned a teen thriller into a generation-defining moment and cemented the track on countless best movie song lists. A dozen more syncs, from car commercials to Netflix dramas, kept the strings in echo. Live events loved it too. Danny Boyle slotted Bittersweet Symphony into the official playlist for the London 2012 Olympic opening ceremony, beaming the riff to a global audience of roughly 1 billion. By the mid-2020s, streaming had taken over. Spotify logs show the single cruising past 1.3 billion plays, making it one of the most streamed tracks of the 90s. Every new placement pushed more money to people who hadn't written a note of it, while Richard Ashcroft, Nick McCabe, and the rest could only watch the meter spin. The injustice became pop culture folklore, a modern parable shared in music business classes and Reddit threads alike. 4 seconds of strings, 20-plus years of someone else's payday. Richard Ashcroft never let the matter drop. After Stones manager Alan Klein died in 2009, his son Jody took over ABKCO. Ashcroft's team quietly reopened talks, arguing that the original agreement had been signed under duress. By 2018, Ashcroft was venting in interviews about millions stolen and hinting that fresh negotiations were underway. The breakthrough came in early 2019. Jody Klein put Ashcroft's managers in touch with the Stones' longtime manager Joyce Smith, who carried the request straight to Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. According to Ashcroft's camp, the two songwriters agreed almost immediately that the situation was unfair. In April, ABKCO, Jagger and Richards signed papers returning 100% of the songwriting credit and all future publishing royalties for Bittersweet Symphony to Ashcroft. Ashcroft announced the news on 23rd of May 2019 while accepting the Ivor Novello Award for Outstanding Contribution to British Music, calling it A kind and magnanimous gesture, he thanked Jagger and Richards for acknowledging I wrote a pretty good song. From that day forward, new radio plays, streams, and sync deals would finally pay the people who made the record, though the estimated $5 million banked between 1987 and 2019 stayed with ABKCO. It was more than money. Bassist Simon Jones described the moment as lifting a weight we'd carried for 22 years. Guitarist Nick McCabe joked that the band could finally stop being a cautionary tale in every music business lecture. And for Britpop fans, the deal felt like long overdue justice. The song that had defined a summer was back where it belonged, credited solely to Richard Ashcroft. Long before Spotify and TikTok, artists were already lifting snippets of older tracks to build something new. At first, the rules felt loose. Early hip-hop crews sampled whole riffs on homemade tapes, but a few high-profile clashes forced labels to tighten clearance checks. The first wake-up call hit in 1990 when Vanilla Ice's Ice Ice Baby borrowed the bass line from Queen and David Bowie's Under Pressure. Queen's lawyers pounced, and Ice settled for a reported $4 million plus shared writing credit, proof that a short loop could carry a sky-high price tag. 7 years later came the Verve's Bittersweet Symphony, whose looping strings sparked the greatest hit heist. Because Richard Ashcroft had cleared the sound recording, but not enough of the underlying composition, Alan Klein's ABKCO claimed the entire publishing pot. The outcome became a textbook example in music business classes. Always secure both sets of rights, or risk losing everything. Fast forward to 2015 and the Blurred Lines verdict. A U.S. jury said Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams owed the Marvin Gaye estate $7.4 million for copying the feel, not a literal sample of "Got to Give It Up." Lawyers hailed the case as expanding copyright protection into vibe and groove, further raising the bar for modern producers. Taken together, these clashes reshaped pop. Labels now keep armies of clearance officers, and many artists hire musicologists before a single note leaves the studio. The Verve saga sits at the center of that shift. Proof that 4 seconds of borrowed sound can rewrite careers and, sometimes, the rulebook itself. Were you cranking Bittersweet Symphony from the car stereo back in '97? Smash subscribe and ring the bell for more untold stories behind the songs that scored our 40s. Then drop a comment telling us where you first heard that iconic string riff. Bittersweet Symphony shows how a tiny oversight can snowball into a perfect storm. A soaring riff that sells millions, a last-minute contract twist, and 2 decades of royalties funneled to people who never stepped into the studio. Other cases have cost more, but none paired such cultural impact with such lopsided paperwork. When Jagger and Richards finally handed the song back in 2019, they didn't just right a wrong, they underlined the track's legend. Today, the story lives on as a cautionary tale for new musicians and a reminder that even in a business built on creativity, the fine print can decide who wins the jackpot. And thanks to that late-stage reversal, Bittersweet Symphony now ends the way it always sounded, with its own writer finally in control of the tune that made the world slow walk in time.